A woman stood frozen in the middle of the bakery. I'm sorry, she whispered, searching inside her worn handbag again. I thought I had enough. The cashier sighed loudly. You've counted those coins 3 times already. Customers behind her began to murmur. If you can't pay, please step aside. The elderly Korean woman lowered her head. Her hands trembled as she gathered the few coins that had scattered across the counter. One customer shook his head impatiently. People shouldn't shop if they have no money. Another laughed. It's just bread. Why make everyone wait? The old woman's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She quietly reached for the loaf, intending to place it back on the shelf. Before she could, a calm voice interrupted. I'll pay for it. Everyone turned. Standing near the entrance was a tall black man wearing a faded blue janitor's uniform. A mop bucket still rested outside the bakery door where he had left it moments earlier. His name was Isaiah Brooks. His work boots were worn at the edges. The sleeves of his uniform had been stitched by hand after tearing months earlier. He looked exhausted. The kind of exhausted that came from carrying more than just a job. He walked to the counter and placed 2 wrinkled bills beside the register. Please add whatever else she needs. The cashier looked at him. Are you sure? Isaiah smiled. Everyone deserves fresh bread. The cashier accepted the money. The old woman stared at him in disbelief. You don't even know me. Isaiah simply shrugged. My grandmother always says kindness doesn't need introductions. The woman looked into his eyes for a long moment. There was something different about him. No expectation. No pride. No performance. Just quiet compassion. She accepted the bread with both hands. Thank you. Isaiah nodded. Take care of yourself. As she slowly walked toward the door, she paused for only a second before looking back at him. There was an unreadable expression on her face. Almost as if she had just found something she'd been searching for. Then she disappeared into the busy streets of Seoul. Isaiah picked up his empty wallet. There wasn't a single bill left inside. Not one. That had been every dollar he had until payday. And payday was still 4 days away. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. It's always amazing to see people from around the world coming together for stories that remind us kindness still exists. Now, back to Isaiah. Every evening, just after 6, Isaiah cleaned the headquarters of Han Global Technologies, one of South Korea's largest technology companies. Most employees barely noticed him. Some walked past while talking on expensive phones. Others left coffee cups on conference tables without a second thought. To them, he was simply part of the building. Invisible. Yet Isaiah greeted everyone with the same smile. Good evening. Have a safe trip home. Take care. Some answered. Most didn't. His shift lasted 11 hours. After taxes and deductions, nearly 70% of his paycheck never stayed with him. It went to Atlanta. His grandmother, Evelyn Brooks, had raised him after his mother died waiting for medical treatment they couldn't afford. She had skipped meals so Isaiah and his younger brother Daniel could eat. Worked double shifts until arthritis twisted her hands. Sacrificed everything without ever calling it sacrifice. Now it was Isaiah's turn. Every month he paid her medical bills before paying his own rent. He never regretted it. Not once. When midnight arrived, the offices became silent. Isaiah pushed his cleaning cart through the executive floor. While wiping fingerprints from a conference table, he noticed one of the automated presentation screens flashing an error message. Most people would have ignored it. Isaiah didn't. He opened the maintenance panel beneath the display. Within 3 minutes, he had located a loose circuit connection. He tightened it using a small screwdriver he carried inside his pocket. The screen flickered back to life. He smiled to himself. Before life forced him to quit university, Isaiah had studied mechanical engineering. Machines still made sense to him. People. Not always. He quietly closed the panel before anyone noticed. If management discovered a janitor knew more about their equipment than some engineers, they probably wouldn't thank him. They'd ask uncomfortable questions. The following morning, Isaiah returned to his tiny apartment carrying a loaf of discounted bread he'd bought with reward points from the grocery store. He unlocked the door. Stopped. His landlord stood inside. Arms crossed. Expression cold. You have until tonight. Isaiah frowned. I thought I had 3 more days. You were short last month. I'll have it by Friday. The landlord shook his head. I've already rented this place. Please, just 4 days. No. The older man tossed a folded notice onto the table. You chose to buy someone else's groceries yesterday. Isaiah froze. The landlord had seen everything. You had money. I used it to help someone. And now you can help yourself find somewhere else to sleep. The door slammed behind him. Isaiah stood alone in the tiny apartment. He looked around the room. One bed. One chair. A small family photograph. And the eviction notice resting on the table. For the first time in years, he wondered if kindness had finally cost him too much. Outside, across the street, a black luxury sedan quietly pulled away from the curb. Inside the back seat sat the elderly woman from the bakery. She hadn't stopped watching the apartment. Not for a single second. She lowered her gaze to a leather notebook resting in her lap and wrote just 5 words. Candidate 1 has passed compassion. Then she closed the notebook. And smiled. The black sedan rolled silently through the gates of Han Global Technologies. Security guards who barely looked at one another suddenly stood perfectly straight. The massive steel gates opened without delay. Inside the car, the elderly woman removed the faded gray scarf from around her shoulders. Gone was the frail woman everyone had pitied inside the bakery. Her posture changed. Her eyes sharpened. Her quiet smile disappeared. "Good morning, Chairwoman Han," the driver said respectfully. Chairwoman Han Seo-jin simply nodded. "Bring Mr. Kong and Ms. Kim to the executive boardroom." "Immediately, ma'am." Within minutes, every senior executive inside the 42-story headquarters had received the same message. Emergency board meeting. Attendance mandatory. No explanation. No agenda. Those meetings almost never happened. And when they did, someone's career usually ended. Kang Min-ho adjusted his tie as he entered the boardroom. As chief operating officer, he considered himself the obvious successor to Chairwoman Han. 30 years inside the company. Perfect financial results. Flawless public image. He had already begun imagining the announcement. Today perhaps. Instead, he found Chairwoman Han quietly looking through a small notebook. The same notebook she had carried into the bakery. She didn't look up. "Tell me something, Mr. Kong?" He smiled confidently. "Anything. What makes a great leader?" The question seemed too easy. "Results," he answered. "Profit. Discipline. The ability to make difficult decisions." She nodded thoughtfully. "And compassion?" Kong hesitated only a moment. "Compassion has its place. But business isn't charity." A faint smile crossed her face. "I see." She closed the notebook. "I spent yesterday walking through the city." Several executives exchanged nervous glances. They knew she occasionally disappeared without security, but none of them understood why. "I watched over 200 people." She paused. "Do you know how many stopped to help someone?" Silence. 3. She looked directly at Kong. Only one gave away everything he had. The room remained quiet. "Find him." Kong frowned. "Who is he?" "A janitor." Several executives blinked. "A janitor?" "He works in this building." Another silence followed. One director couldn't help asking, "Chairwoman, why?" She answered without emotion. "Because every resume tells me what someone has done." She tapped the notebook once. "But compassion tells me who they are." Meanwhile, Isaiah had nowhere to go. Everything he owned fit into one duffel bag. 2 uniforms. 3 shirts. His mother's photograph. His engineering textbooks. And a worn envelope containing letters from his grandmother. He carried the bag through the streets until he reached a small neighborhood park. He sat on a wooden bench and checked his phone. One missed call. "Grandma." He smiled sadly before calling back. "Evelyn Brooks speaking." "Morning, Grandma." "There you are. I've been waiting. How are your knees today?" "Oh, they're still arguing with me." She laughed. "But don't you change the subject. Have you been eating?" Isaiah looked down at the single slice of bread resting beside him. "I had breakfast." It wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't entirely false either. She sighed. "You always say that when you're worried." "I'm okay." "You sound tired." "Just work." There was a brief silence. Then she spoke softly. "Your mother used to sound exactly like that." Isaiah closed his eyes. "I miss her." "So do I." Another pause. Then Evelyn said something she had told him since he was a child. "Don't ever let hardship convince you to become someone you're not. The world has enough wealthy people. It doesn't have enough good people." Isaiah smiled despite everything. "I know. You taught me that. If helping someone leaves your pockets empty." She chuckled. "God has a funny way of filling them again." Isaiah laughed quietly. "I hope you're right." "I know I'm right." Several blocks away. Kim Eun-ah studied Isaiah's employee file. 28 years old. No disciplinary record. Perfect attendance. Consistently excellent performance reviews. Volunteer work on weekends. Engineering studies interrupted after his mother's death. She looked confused. Why is this man cleaning floors? An HR director shrugged. He never applied for anything else. She continued reading. Every year, Isaiah had declined paid vacation. Instead, he accepted overtime. Every extra hour had been transferred directly to a medical account in Atlanta. Kim slowly lowered the file. He's been working himself into exhaustion. For someone else. For the first time, she understood why Chairwoman Han had become interested. That evening, Isaiah reported for work exactly on time. No one knew he had been evicted. No one knew he hadn't slept. He cleaned the lobby, polished the elevators, collected trash from every executive office. Just after midnight, he noticed a leather wallet lying beside a marble staircase. He opened it just enough to identify the owner. Inside were several thick bundles of cash. Enough money to pay his rent for months. Maybe a year. For one brief moment, his fingers stopped moving. No one was watching. No cameras covered that corner. No one would ever know. Isaiah quietly closed the wallet, then walked straight to the security office. I think someone lost this. The security officer opened it. His eyes widened. There must be almost $15,000 in here. Isaiah smiled. I figured whoever lost it is probably having a worse night than I am. The officer laughed. You don't even want a reward? Isaiah shook his head. No. I just want whoever owns it to stop worrying. Neither man noticed the tiny security camera above the doorway, or the woman watching the footage live from her office upstairs. Chairwoman Han folded her hands. Her eyes glistened. He did it again, she whispered. Without knowing. Without expecting anything. She looked toward Kim Eun-ah. Tomorrow? I want him tested one last time. Kim nodded. And if he passes? Chairwoman Han smiled. Then Han Global has finally found the kind of leader money can't buy. Isaiah walked out of the security office with the same quiet expression he had worn every day for the past 3 years. Returning the wallet hadn't made him feel heroic. To him, it had simply been the right thing to do. As he pushed his cleaning cart toward the engineering wing, he had no idea that dozens of eyes had just watched him pass the most important test of his life. The following morning, Chairwoman Han stood beside the floor-to-ceiling monitor in her private office. The surveillance footage ended with Isaiah disappearing down the hallway. She remained silent for several moments. Finally, she turned to Kim Eun-ah. Do you know why I never promote people because they're brilliant? Kim shook her head. Because brilliance builds companies. She paused. But character keeps them alive. She picked up an old photograph from her desk. It showed a younger version of herself standing beside a smiling man in his 30s. My son. Kim had seen the picture many times but had never dared ask about it. He graduated from the best universities. He spoke 4 languages. He could negotiate billion-dollar contracts without breaking a sweat. Her voice became quieter. But one day I watched him step over an injured delivery driver because he was late for a meeting. She gently placed the photograph back down. That was the day I realized I had failed as a mother. Kim lowered her eyes. My son inherited my company. He never inherited my heart. The room fell silent. When he died, I promised myself something. She looked toward the city skyline. I would never again hand power to someone who lacked compassion. Meanwhile, Isaiah arrived at work carrying the same duffel bag that now held everything he owned. Mrs. Park, the bakery owner, noticed the bag immediately. You've been sleeping somewhere else. Isaiah forced a smile. I'm managing. She folded her arms. Don't lie to an old woman. After a long pause, Isaiah admitted the truth. I lost my apartment. Mrs. Park disappeared into the kitchen. A minute later she returned carrying a warm bowl of beef soup and fresh rice. I didn't order this. I know. I can't pay. I know that too. She pushed the bowl toward him. When my husband died, someone fed me for almost a month. She smiled warmly. They refused to take my money. So today, I'm simply repaying an old debt. Isaiah hesitated, then bowed his head. Thank you. As he lifted the spoon, tears almost escaped his eyes. It was the first hot meal he'd eaten in 2 days. Mrs. Park pretended not to notice. Some kindness was too sacred to acknowledge aloud. Across town, Kang Min-ho sat in his office reading Isaiah's personnel file. The more he read, the less he liked what he saw. Perfect attendance. No complaints. Volunteer work. Engineering background. He tossed the file onto his desk. This is ridiculous. His assistant looked confused. Sir? The chairwoman isn't evaluating him. She's admiring him. And that's dangerous. He leaned back in his chair. If she starts believing janitors belong in executive meetings, what message does that send to everyone who spent decades climbing the ladder? The assistant remained silent. Kang's voice hardened. I didn't sacrifice 30 years of my life to lose everything to a man with a mop. That afternoon, Isaiah was assigned to clean one of Han Global's research laboratories. As he finished mopping the floor, he heard frantic voices from the next room. It's overheating. Shut it down. The emergency controls aren't responding. 3 engineers surrounded a prototype server that emitted a sharp, high-pitched alarm. One reached toward the machine. Another pulled him back. It'll fry the whole system. Isaiah looked through the glass partition. His engineering instincts returned instantly. He recognized the warning lights. Not a catastrophic failure. A cooling valve malfunction. Without thinking, he set down his mop and hurried inside. Move. The engineers stared at him. What? The emergency valve is jammed. One engineer scoffed. You're the janitor. Isaiah ignored him. He removed the side panel, reached behind the cooling assembly, and manually released a pressure lock. The alarm stopped. The server's temperature began falling almost immediately. Silence filled the laboratory. One engineer blinked. How did you know that? Isaiah wiped his hands on a cleaning cloth. I studied mechanical engineering. Before anyone could ask another question, he quietly picked up his mop. I should finish cleaning. And he walked away. The incident reached the executive floor within an hour. Kim Eun-ah couldn't hide her amazement. He prevented nearly $4 million worth of damage. Chairwoman Han smiled. He didn't even wait for someone to thank him. Kim nodded. He simply went back to work. The chairwoman looked out the window again. Some people chase recognition. She smiled softly. Others simply solve problems. But not everyone was impressed. Kang Min-ho's expression darkened as he listened to the report. So now he's the hero engineer too? His assistant remained silent. Kang slowly stood. If the chairwoman sees him as some kind of miracle worker, then I need to remind everyone exactly where he belongs. He walked toward the window. Below, Isaiah was emptying trash bins outside the building. To every employee passing by, he still looked like nothing more than a janitor. Kang smiled coldly. Good men are easy to admire. He turned toward his assistant. But even easier to destroy. The assistant hesitated. What are you planning? Kang's answer came without emotion. Tomorrow? The entire company will believe that Isaiah Brooks stole something far more valuable than a wallet. He looked back at the parking lot below. And once his reputation is gone, so is the chairwoman's little experiment. Far below, completely unaware of the storm gathering around him, Isaiah helped an elderly security guard carry 2 heavy boxes to his car. Neither man noticed Kang watching from 42 floors above. The trap had already been set. The next morning began like every other. Isaiah arrived 15 minutes early. He greeted the security guards, collected his cleaning supplies, and quietly started polishing the marble floors in the executive lobby. He had no idea that everyone inside the building had already received an urgent company-wide email. Confidential security investigation. Employee suspected of corporate theft. At exactly 9:15 a.m., 2 security officers approached him. Mr. Brooks? Isaiah looked up and smiled. Good morning. Please come with us. Several employees slowed their pace. Whispers spread almost instantly. What happened? Did the janitor steal something? I heard sensitive company files are missing. Isaiah frowned. There must be some mistake. Just come with us. He followed without resisting. Inside the security office, Kang Min-ho was already waiting. A sleek black laptop sat on the table. Beside it was a small encrypted storage drive. Kang folded his hands. This drive disappeared from our research laboratory yesterday. Isaiah looked confused. I've never seen it. Kang slid a photograph across the table. It showed Isaiah entering the laboratory. You were there. I was cleaning. You were also alone. Isaiah nodded. After the engineers left, Kang leaned forward. And shortly afterward, the drive vanished. Isaiah remained calm. I didn't take it. We searched your locker. One of the guards placed the storage drive on the table. Isaiah's eyes widened. That's impossible. It was inside your bag. He stared at the evidence. Someone had planted it. But who? And why? Within minutes, rumors flooded the building. The janitor stole company secrets. I always knew something felt strange. Didn't he fix one of the machines yesterday? Maybe he was spying all along. The same people who had ignored him yesterday suddenly spoke about him with certainty. No one asked for proof. No one asked for his side. They simply believed the accusation. Kim Eun-ah stormed into Chairwoman Han's office. This is a setup. Chairwoman Han looked up from her desk. I know. We should stop it. No. Kim stared in disbelief. Ma'am? If I stop it now, I'll never learn who truly deserves to stay in this company. She calmly stood. Truth has a way of revealing everyone. Meanwhile, Isaiah sat alone inside a small interview room. The silence felt heavier than the accusation. A security officer entered carrying a document. If you sign this confession, the company will recommend a lighter sentence. Isaiah read the paper. It claimed he had stolen confidential technology in exchange for money. I won't sign. You could go to prison. I still won't sign. The officer sighed. Why make this harder? Isaiah slowly folded the paper. Because telling a lie won't make my life easier. It will only make it dishonest. Hours later, the executive board assembled. Every director, every senior manager, even department heads filled the room. Isaiah was escorted inside. Still wearing his faded janitor's uniform. Still carrying himself with quiet dignity. Employees whispered as he walked past. Some looked disappointed. Others looked satisfied. Kang Min-ho stood. Ladies and gentlemen, our investigation has concluded. The stolen drive was recovered from Mr. Isaiah Brooks' belongings. He turned toward Isaiah. Do you have anything you'd like to say before the board votes to terminate your employment and forward this matter to the authorities? The room became silent. Isaiah looked around slowly. He saw suspicion, disappointment, judgment. Then he spoke. I didn't steal anything. Can you prove it? No. Another whisper spread across the room. But I know who I am. Kang smiled. That's not evidence. Isaiah nodded. You're right. It isn't. He took a slow breath. My mother taught me something before she died. If the truth is standing alone, stand beside it anyway, even if nobody else does. The room fell silent again. Several employees lowered their eyes. His voice never rose. He never begged, never argued, never blamed anyone. He simply stood there. Come. Honest. Kang turned toward the board. I believe we've heard enough. I recommend immediate dismissal. One director raised his hand. I second the motion. Another nodded. So do I. One by one, hands began rising across the room. Isaiah watched quietly. Not angry. Just disappointed. Not because he was losing his job, but because doing the right thing had once again cost him everything. Just as the final vote was about to begin, a voice echoed through the room. Before anyone votes, I'd like to ask one question. Every head turned. Chairwoman Han slowly rose from her seat at the end of the table. For the first time that day, she wasn't smiling. She looked directly at Kang Min-ho. Mr. Kang? When exactly did you decide that integrity could be fabricated? The room froze. Kang blinked. I'm not sure I understand. Oh. She reached into her handbag. I think you do. She placed a small remote control on the table. Pressed a single button. The giant screen behind her came to life. Security footage filled the room. Not of Isaiah. Of Kang's executive assistant. Late the previous evening. Opening Isaiah's locker. Looking over both shoulders. Then quietly placing the encrypted drive inside his duffel bag. Gasps erupted across the boardroom. One executive stood so quickly his chair crashed backward. Kim Eun-ah watched Kang's face lose every trace of confidence. Chairwoman Han folded her hands. I've been watching much more than Mr. Brooks. She looked around the room. I've been watching all of you. Kang took a nervous step backward. This is being misunderstood. Chairwoman Han interrupted him. No. For the first time. Everyone is finally understanding. She turned toward Isaiah. Then smiled gently. The final test is over. The boardroom fell into complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Every eye remained fixed on the enormous screen as the security footage replayed once more. There was no doubt. Kang Min-ho's executive assistant had planted the encrypted drive inside Isaiah's bag. The accusation had been carefully planned from the very beginning. Kang swallowed hard. Chairwoman. I can explain. Chairwoman Han looked at him with quiet disappointment. I've waited 30 years to hear you explain compassion. You've never managed. She pressed another button on the remote. Another video appeared. This one showed Kang instructing his assistant late the previous evening. If the janitor's reputation disappears, so does the chairwoman's little experiment. A wave of shocked whispers swept through the room. One board member slowly removed his glasses. Another buried his face in his hands. They had trusted Kang for decades. Now they realized they had trusted the wrong man. Kang's shoulders slumped. For the first time in his career, he had nothing left to say. Chairwoman Han turned toward the security officers. Escort Mr. Kang from the building. And notify the authorities. Neither officer hesitated. Kang looked around the room hoping someone would defend him. No one did. As the doors closed behind him, the most powerful executive in Han Global walked away with nothing except the consequences of his own choices. Chairwoman Han then looked at Isaiah. He was still standing quietly in the same place. Still wearing his faded janitor's uniform. Still holding the pair of worn work gloves he'd carried into the room. She smiled. Mr. Brooks. Do you remember me? Isaiah frowned slightly. I've seen you before. She nodded. Where? He thought for a moment. Then his eyes widened. The bakery? The bread? She smiled warmly. Yes. A soft murmur spread across the room. The executives looked at one another in confusion. Chairwoman Han continued. You thought I was an elderly woman who couldn't afford lunch. I was. She paused. I simply wasn't poor. Another wave of whispers filled the room. For nearly 15 years, she continued, I have walked through this city without security. I eat where ordinary people eat. I ride buses. I visit small shops. I watch. She slowly walked toward Isaiah. I've interviewed graduates from the finest universities. I've met politicians, military officers, industry leaders. They all impressed me with their intelligence. She stopped directly in front of him. But none of them gave away their last dollar to protect a stranger's dignity. The room became silent once again. Chairwoman Han reached into her handbag and removed the small leather notebook. She opened it to the first page. Written in neat handwriting were 5 simple words. Candidate 1 has passed compassion. I wrote these words outside your apartment. The day you became homeless. Isaiah stared at the notebook. You knew. I knew. And I watched. She smiled gently. You never complained. You never became bitter. You never stopped helping people. She looked toward the board. Yesterday he returned a wallet containing enough money to change his life. He refused a reward. This morning he was willing to lose his career rather than tell a lie. She closed the notebook. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the man I've been searching for. One director finally spoke. Chairwoman, are you saying Mr. Brooks is to be promoted? She smiled. No. The room looked puzzled. I'm saying he is the future of this company. A collective gasp filled the boardroom. Isaiah blinked. I don't understand. You will. She walked back to the head of the table. Effective immediately. Isaiah Brooks is appointed Executive Director of Community Development and Employee Well-being. The room erupted. Some executives applauded. Others stared in disbelief. The janitor was now an executive. Isaiah slowly shook his head. Chairwoman, I appreciate your kindness. But I can't accept. The applause stopped instantly. Chairwoman Han smiled. I hoped you'd say that. Isaiah looked around the room. I've cleaned these floors for 3 years. I know the names of every janitor, every security guard, every cafeteria worker. They're the people who keep this company running. He took a deep breath. If I'm going to accept this position, I have one condition. Chairwoman Han folded her arms. What is it? Isaiah answered without hesitation. No employee who works full-time here should ever have to choose between paying rent and buying food. The room became perfectly still. And every child of every maintenance worker should have access to a college scholarship. He looked at Chairwoman Han. If we succeed, everyone should succeed. For a long moment, the chairwoman simply stared at him. Then she laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. But with genuine joy. Tears formed in her eyes. I've spent 15 years looking for someone worthy of leading this company. She smiled. I almost walked past him carrying a mop. The board rose to its feet. This time, the applause didn't stop. 6 months later, Han Global had changed. Every hourly employee received a living wage. Medical assistance programs expanded. Scholarships were created for workers' children. Employee turnover dropped to the lowest level in company history. Productivity reached record highs. Not because people feared management, because they finally felt valued. Mrs. Park stood outside her bakery one sunny afternoon when a black company vehicle stopped in front of the shop. Isaiah stepped out. Only now he wore a simple navy blue suit. Nothing expensive. Nothing flashy. He still carried the same warm smile. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her an envelope. Mrs. Park opened it. Inside was the deed to the entire building. Her hands began to shake. "No. I can't accept this." Isaiah smiled. "You fed a hungry man when nobody else knew he was hungry. You reminded me that kindness travels farther than we ever imagine. This is simply your kindness finding its way home." Mrs. Park wiped away tears as she hugged him tightly. A few days later, Isaiah flew to Atlanta. For the first time in years, he wasn't carrying bills or worries. He was carrying hope. His grandmother opened the front door. The moment she saw him, she smiled. "You've been eating." Isaiah laughed. "I finally listened." He hugged her tightly. "I have some good news." She looked into his eyes. "I already know." He blinked. "How?" She smiled. "Because the Lord has a habit of keeping his promises." She gently touched his cheek. "I told you. If helping someone empties your pockets, God has a funny way of filling them again." Several weeks later, Isaiah stopped outside the same bakery where everything had begun. Another elderly customer stood at the register. She searched her purse nervously. "I'm sorry. I don't have enough." Without saying a word, Isaiah stepped forward. "I'll take care of it." The woman looked up. "You don't know me." Isaiah smiled exactly as he had months before. "My grandmother always says, kindness doesn't need introductions." He paid for the bread, picked up his bag, and quietly walked away. No cameras, no applause, no reporters. Just another ordinary act of kindness. Because true generosity isn't measured by how much you have. It's measured by what you're willing to give when no one is watching. And sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can open a door that wealth never could. What did this story teach you about kindness and character? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story. Remember, the greatest wealth you'll ever possess isn't the money you earn. It's the kindness you choose to give.